in war, everything is vulnerable. Everything is subject to destruction. I believe people, my generation, for example, are stronger in our willpower, more determined to do things that we think is right. And therefore, it's the first good thing. But it is also the first bad thing, as I said, because sometimes war brings you an over-aggressive mentality and even approach in your day-to-day life. It is war and war experience that brought our country the poverty, the desperate poverty that was reflected in the job that I have told you. And what is more important is the reasons behind the poverty, that poverty. It's the policy. And who produced the policy? That is those people who, for their whole lives, dedicated to war without being trained in anything, including governance, economic management, and the like. That's the first thing. The second thing, good thing, is the peace experience.
The what?
Peace. Contrast to war. We really treasure peace. I remember once a Vietnamese American friend of mine, when coming back to Vietnam, come to visit my home. And she told me, Giang, why I see quite often movies about the war? Is it a kind of policy to teach people about the hatred against Americans, for example, or French or Japanese? I say no. If you look into the movies, if you watch them more carefully, and if you can compare those movies with American movies about the Vietnam War, you'll see one thing very, very different. Vietnamese movies about the war are about the Vietnamese people, not about the Americans. Bombs, shelters, ammunition, tanks, artilleries, all these things are just means to describe the war. But the main content or the content running through the movies are about the Vietnamese people, how we assisted each other in the war. And therefore, these movies are used to teach the people to love peace, to love humanity. Otherwise, you would not have the 88% of Vietnamese having positive views about the Americans. Believe me. If there is anything, another bad thing about the Vietnamese people and land, again, it's peace. Can you believe it? Again, it's peace. Particularly for younger generation. You never believe it. My children, I have two daughters. One is nearly 27. One is turning 19 in 3 months. They know very little about the war. While my father, my mother all experienced war. My wife, myself experienced war. But they know very little about the war. Why? The way we teach them. But they seem to think that peace is something granted. You can take for granted. What we think of it, when I say peace experience is bad thing, I mean we need to change the way we educate children. Peace can only be available to you at a very high cost. Cost of blood, cost of lives and blood of generations. And you have to treasure peace. You have to defend peace. And I'm sorry, I have thought of only two things.
All right. Thank you very much. Mr. Scorza, all yours.
Thank you. We now have time for a few questions for the ambassador. If you'll raise your hand, there's a handsome fellow with a wireless microphone who will come down, well, not so handsome fellow with a wireless microphone, who will come down the aisle. So first I'd like to call on the woman here in the second row.
I was one of the people who was on the streets of Washington during the peace movement while you were fighting in the jungle, in the jungles. And there was a spiritual connection that we could not define, but we were with you in spirit. My question is, the German election, which has just happened a couple of days ago, the Free Democrats will be in coalition with the Christian Democrats. They're a business, they are very friendly to business. Will NATO then become actually, I'm concerned about Afghanistan, and NATO is in Afghanistan. Is the United States and President Obama going to be distanced from the possibility of withdrawal because Germany and NATO are going to stay in the fight?
Let me take this question rather than him.
Thank you so much.
And you may be sorry you asked it.
I'm taking it only because one of my problems in the United States is that this country has a very poor concept of geography. And your question is one of the examples of that poor knowledge of geography. Here we have something called the North Atlantic Organization, NATO, which somehow believes that Afghanistan is in the North Atlantic. I am fascinated by this definition of geography. What does Afghanistan have to do with NATO? Nobody has ever succeeded in explaining it to me. And I, coming from Pakistan, have said, if Afghanistan can be part of NATO, of the North Atlantic, why not Pakistan also? I would love to be a member of the North Atlantic Alliance. But until that happens, I think NATO is miscast in Afghanistan, Chancellor Merkel or no Chancellor Merkel. And so, sooner or later, the facts of geography will come home to the participants in the North Atlantic Treaty Organization.
Next question, please. First, this fellow here on the aisle, and then next on the other side.
My name is Borshan. I'm from my business core class, and my professor is here in the audience, and there she is. I got several questions. You said in the beginning, it's mostly beginning, you said 4 out of 5 nations of Security Councils invade Vietnam. Why not Russia?
Well, you need to ask the Russians.
Yeah.
There's still time.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. There's still time.
Actually, I'm sorry, but we often wonder about why somebody invades us, not why some others do not invade us.
Yeah, that's going to be my next question. I got several more.
One more.
All right. In the beginning of Vietnam's history, like almost every neighbor overseas nation, they kept invading